I'll assume you've read the passage already. The author of the passage would most likely agree with which of the following assertions about Mandarin and Cantonese? Well, they both take place in China. We have written Chinese diverged in the mid-20th century, and spoken Chinese is split between the two. And where else do we find out about Chinese? Well, I think that's mostly what we have. Let's take a look at the answers. Which one must the author agree with based on what's in the passage? A, they collectively have more speakers worldwide than English does. That's certainly, while it's true, or possibly true, it's not something that the author would necessarily agree with. B, their relationship is a prime example of diglossia. So diglossia is two or more languages used in the same language community. So even though Chinese is an example of pluricentrism, pluricentrism is a very specific type of diglossia. In pluricentrism, you have two languages in a language community, both of which have standard, and there's more than one standard spoken and written version. When you only have one standard but still two versions of the language, or two or more languages or dialects, then it's diglossia. So it is an example of both diglossia and pluricentrism. So it would be an example of diglossia. C, they are the high language and the low language respectively. So the high and low is actually mentioned later on and not used in the context of Chinese or China, with Mandarin and Cantonese. D, they could justifiably be considered two separate tongues. They do get mentioned later on as being mutually unintelligible. They are in effect mutually unintelligible, as is the case with Mandarin and Cantonese. Could they justifiably be considered two separate tongues? The author doesn't really give an explanation of how you would justify counting something as two separate tongues. So that's a less good example. Even though it's very plausible, there's nothing that the author says that this means they should be considered two separate things. Finally, E, they coexist because neither one is afforded a higher official status. Again, we don't find out that this is the case. In fact, it's used in the context of this phenomenon where one's a high and one's a low is of interest when the languages are mutually unintelligible like Mandarin and Cantonese. So it implies actually that one is high and one is low, and one is official and one isn't. But so if it's true, if this is even a factor in the passage, it's the opposite. But we definitely can't say that this is something the author would agree with, which leaves us with choice B. Diglossia, you do have two languages or dialects used in the same language community. In the case of Mandarin and Cantonese, they both have standard spoken and written versions, but that doesn't mean that they're not diglossia.